Hey everyone. May need to get a water before we start. I ran to go get AC and supper at Fox's, and I was supposed to get marinara, and I didn't grab the marinara, so I had to turn around and go to Kroger and find the marinara sauce quickly, and then get here before this started. But I made it. Hey Sam, I'm gonna get started at 5 this time, so not a whole lot of starting stuff, I guess. I'll just get right into it here in a few minutes. But so just hang tight for me, Sambo. I'll wave at you. Let's see. All right, if while I'm going to get, hey Cody, it didn't tell me that you got on. There you go. While I go get a bottle of water, go to Genesis 45, and we're gonna be right at the beginning of it. So Genesis 45, go. Be right back. I'm back. Have to lock the door to the office in case the dogs come in and knock the door down and start fighting on the screen. That's okay, Cody. There's always next week. We'll miss you, but it's understandable. I probably need to pick a better time for the Zoom calls anyways, because that's normally what time people are eating supper. But, you know, I'm thinking, like, if y'all are youth, then that's the right time. But if you're not youth, you're probably eating supper with your family. Okay. I just couldn't do it at 6 tonight because AC's got work, and that's when she leaves. And I want to be able to tell her bye. But I'm going to get into it if y'all are cool with it. And what we're talking about tonight, or whenever you watch it, for somebody who's not watching it at the time that we start, and Leah, is how when we don't know what to do next, we're finishing up our series, right, with Joseph. And when you don't know what to do next and you find yourself kind of confused on how to handle a situation, we're talking about this idea of payback, and I talked about it the other day in one of the daily devotionals, but we're going to unpack it a little bit more today. And to start off, I kind of want to give an example of a time when I lived with my roommate, Austin, and that was before I got married. It was after I graduated at MC and before I got married. And we would always take turns going to the grocery store and stuff. A lot of times we'd go together just because it was more fun and had somebody to hang out with while we did it. But a lot of the times when he would go and he would buy the groceries, sometimes he would buy like the stuff that he knew that I needed, that he had seen was out in the refrigerator, and he wouldn't ask me to pay him back. And sometimes not being asked to pay something back can be good, or not asking to be paid back can be good, but sometimes it's kind of complicated, right? Because when somebody buys something for you isn't the only time in our lives when we have this concept of payback. You see, payback is also used when we are hurt by somebody. It comes up when somebody hurts us, right? And it also it comes up when you're talked about behind your back, when you don't get invited to the friend group, when people bully you. All of these things bring up this idea of payback. It's just like the first thing that comes to our minds. And I'm not saying that everybody gets like scary movie revenge plot, mode, or goes and writes a pop song about that person who hurt them or did them wrong. But what I am saying is you do typically, when you get hurt, you want somebody that hurts you to feel the pain that you felt to an extent, or you want them to at least feel something. And that's just our natural inclination. And there's three kinds of that payback, really. There's public payback, meaning if somebody talks bad about you, then you're going to snap back at them. You're gonna go off on them as well, where everybody sees it. There's passive payback, and that's when somebody says something to you or about you, and you go and we used to subtweet, but nobody uses Twitter anymore, I don't think. So whatever the equivalent is on Instagram or whatever, you go and make a subtle post about that person. That's kind of like a passive way to get it off your chest, right? Like if you get left out hanging out with some people, some of your friends, then you'll go and make a post with, talking about how much fun you're having, right? And then there's another kind. It's called imaginary payback, and this is the one that I think we probably hire the most. It's when you have an imaginary conversation in your head with that other person. You absolutely flame them, you just destroy them, and completely, like, no punches held, just wreck them in your mind. But you don't ever actually do anything about it, right? That's the imaginary kind of payback. But I think that the most satisfying kind of payback, and the kind of payback that we have to be the most careful about, is this idea that we enjoy watching the other person fail. And this is what I mean. When you get broken up with by someone, you enjoy when they get broken up with by somebody else. Or when your mom, she gets upset, she gets worked up, and she snaps at you, and then regrets it later and apologizes sincerely. You kind of bask in that moment. You enjoy that moment when the other person admits that they're wrong. Or that person that's been talking about you behind your back absolutely face plants at a pep rally game. I mean, any of these things are the most kind of satisfying and make us feel the best about payback because we can see it and it's instant. It feels like justice. But so what we're going to look at today is this situation is super cool. Like I said, if you're just hopping on, Genesis 45 is where we're going to be, and we're going to look at the situation that Joseph was in. That was very much that very same situation where he is put in a perfect position to get complete payback, and we'll see how he handles it. But look, I'm doing like a 5-second recap of Joseph, okay? He was with his family, has a bunch of brothers. He's his dad's favorite. His dad gives him a real cool coat, and his brothers hate him for it. They know that he's the favorite. He has these dreams. In his dreams, he dreams that all of his family bows down to him, and they're like, nah, I'm not about that. So his brothers are like, well, let's kill him. And then Reuben's like, let's not kill him, let's sell him. And so they sell him into slavery into Egypt. So he was a slave in Egypt, okay? And then he was a slave in prison in Egypt because he was thrown into prison because his owner's wife basically lied about him and said that he did things that he didn't do. And then all of a sudden he interprets these dreams for Pharaoh, and he's second in command in Egypt. Like, he's the big dog. He makes all the shots because Pharaoh's too busy, like eating grapes handed to him on the vine and stuff like that. So Joseph's life is literally like a roller coaster, and it's on the up right now. And then back home for Joseph, there's a food shortage. There's an absolute just shortage of food. Everybody's starving. And turns out his brothers end up coming to Egypt because the land of Egypt is so prosperous at this time. They're hitting home runs. They got food for days. They got just like storage sheds and storage sheds full of food. And the brothers know about this, so they come and they ask for food. And if you want to read the whole story of the interactions, I can't obviously read the whole thing right now. But if you read Genesis 42 to Genesis 50, it's like a full movie, basically. You can just see the whole the whole laying out of these interactions between Joseph and his brothers. The cool part is they never even imagined that he would be alive, much less second in command in Egypt. So they don't recognize him. They don't know who he is. I'm sure, it's been 2 years, so I'm sure he looks completely different. Or it's been at least 2 years. And I'm sure he looks completely different than he did when they sold him. So he was probably dressed differently. So you can read all those interactions because they create a backstory. But we're going to be in Genesis 45. And I'm going to read the first 3 verses of Genesis 45. So this is what the word of the Lord says. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. So he told his brothers who he was. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. So imagine that, just tension, the irony, the role reversal that has taken place, where he was in slavery and his brothers were just doing with him whatever they wanted, and now they're at his mercy because he is in command. He basically gets to decide whether they live or not because he's in control of the food storage. And this is what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about payback. He's set up perfectly to have a perfect payback opportunity. He could just stick it to him like as much as possible, as much as he wants. But what I want, and this is where this is going to matter for you watching. Pause. You can either literally pause or just think for a minute. What would you do in that situation? For me, I'm not so sure. If my brother sold me into slavery, I'm not so sure how I could have or would have handled that. But instead of thinking about that, we can look and see how Joseph did react in that situation. So picking up about halfway through 4. He said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance." And the reason that we're talking about this today when we're talking about payback is because of this one completely just simple truth. The only way that Joseph could have responded this way to his brothers is because he completely gave up the idea of revenge a long time ago. He completely let go of that idea. He completely just put it off the table. And that's the only way. Because there's no other explanation for how he could have looked at his brothers that sold him in slavery and had grief and actually cared about what they cared about or how they felt. There's no way. So he acknowledged their wrongs, because if you look at the end of, like around in verse 7, sorry, not verse 7. Do not be distressed. It was in verse 5. Do not be distressed and not be angry with yourselves for selling me here. He acknowledged what they did wrong. He acknowledged that they sold him, but he acknowledged the hurt without causing more hurt. He stopped it. And that can only be done by choosing forgiveness. You see, forgiveness is an option. It's a kind of payback. It's a good payback. It's a positive payback. But he ultimately chose forgiveness over paying back evil for evil. And what he did is he allowed God to be the central point of his healing process, because God is the only one that can give us that strength to forgive someone instead of request payback. And then he did what Joseph does, because he was in a position of power, he told his brothers to go home, get their father, bring them all to Egypt. He's going to take care of them. And we get to look ahead at verse 15. He says, "And he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterwards, his brothers talked with him." So this is the whole main point right here. Catch this. What Joseph did could only have been done by the power of God. It's this idea that God can do something better than payback. It's the only thing that is better than payback. Because we're not going to lie and say payback doesn't feel good. But there's only one thing better than payback, and it's reconciliation. And that's what we see in this story. And that's what we see throughout the whole story of the Bible, as we see how God constantly uses reconciliation over payback. He constantly seeks reconciliation. He literally has been doing it since the first sin of Adam and Eve. He's been seeking reconciliation with humankind. And this is just an example of that. It's something that only God can do. Only God can bring peace where there's been hurt. Because that's not human nature. That's not what humans want to do. Humans want payback. And only God can give us the power to pursue peace instead of payback. You see, whenever you're in a situation, regardless of what that situation is, when somebody's hurt you, you can fight to be right. You can fight to win. You can even fight to make a point. Or you can fight that urge to get payback and fight against it and fight for peace. Because you can't do both. You can't fight for payback and fight to be right and fight for peace. They don't go together. And the only reason that Joseph chose peace is because he chose forgiveness. And the only way that he could forgive was with the help of God. The only way he could forgive was with the power that God was giving him. So the reason that all of this is complicated and when we're closing, it's going to seem kind of unfinished is because everybody's situation is different. Every single person that watches this is in a different spot. Every single person's hurt is a little bit different. Even if they're similar, they're different. And there's not any two situations that are going to be handled the same way because of that. So you've probably got some questions right now, and I don't blame you. Like, is it always a good idea to reconcile? Is it okay to try to fix a friendship even if it's toxic and draining? What if I'm the one that's done the hurting? What do I do in that situation? And all of those questions are the exact questions that we should have and more. But the truth of it is you can't really answer those questions unless you talk to other people. You need people around you that you can trust. And that's why we do small groups. That's why small groups are so important, I think. Is so that you can have people around you that will have real conversations, and you have even that small group leader there that you can always go to and always talk to. Even when it's weird right now, we may not necessarily be meeting in person, that your small group leader is still there for you. I promise that. And I'm still there for you too. And that's why I'm here, because I can't give a message and it's going to solve every problem. But I can let you know that if you do have hurt and you don't want to get payback, you're tired of fighting for payback, and you're tired of fighting to be right, but you don't really know how to handle it, then there are people that you can go to. And I hope that you hear that. So remember, as we close up this series over Joseph's life, remember that God is planning incredible things for your life that you probably can't even imagine yet. And when you don't know what to do next, and you don't know what he's doing even, what you can know is you can do the next right thing. And in this situation, when you're hurt, is to pursue peace instead of payback. I hope that you take something from this. I hope that you enjoy it. And I really hope that I get to see all of y'all in person soon for everyone who watches this. So I will talk to you later. I'm gonna post this on the page, but I'm also gonna put it on YouTube. If you want to go watch it some other time or want to send it to somebody. All right. Thanks for joining y'all who are here right now, and thanks for those who are watching it later. I'll talk to you. Bye, everyone.